Thanks for joining us on Shannons Club TV, where we relive the histories of memorable and sometimes overlooked cars on Australian roads and racetracks.
In each episode, we open up the archive on our feature car with rare images and an up-close look at an owner's example.
We'll also get the latest market news from the Shannons auctions team. Right now though, the engine option that sprinkled some much-needed twin-carb spice on a bread and butter family car, the Holden HD HR X2.
How exciting was the X2 engine option in 1965. It was launched in the same week that I turned 15, and I remember devouring the latest edition of Wheels magazine, sitting in a tram on the way home. Here was a dream come true, a factory Holden that could achieve 100 miles per hour. 4 years later, I met a bloke who raced an Austin Healey and had an X2 premium manual in that gorgeous metallic light blue in his shed. It would do a genuine 102 when run in, he said, but with 40,000 miles up, it was back to 98. The HD X2 came from the factory with twin carburettors, which always seemed more sporting than the single, more efficient dual throat carby used in the later HR 186S. I reckon if you were keen enough to buy an X2, you'd be keen enough to spend an occasional Saturday morning tuning your pair of single barrel Strombergs. It was pretty out there, Mark, a twin carb Holden from your friendly dealer.
Yeah, it was a pretty remarkable development, although it was a competition car. The HD wasn't the ideal platform to start with, and the HR really wasn't that much better. I mean, you were starting with the relatively skinny track dimensions of the EH Holden and a wheelbase that was almost as short.
A big wide body dropped on top.
But you had this new body that was both heavier and larger than the EH in every dimension. Not only that, it also had a higher centre of gravity, and the engine was further forward in the chassis, so you had more weight over the front wheels. So adding all those together, it faced a bit of an uphill battle as a competition car, which I'll get to a bit later on.
There was one problem with the timing of the X2 option's debut. The HD had ball joint front suspension, and GMH's engineers were developing a front disc brake package, and not before time. But it was 4 months away from production when the HD was released. Critics had a field day. 100-mile-an-hour family sedan with drum brakes. The HD's front drums were 30% bigger, but that didn't make any difference to the critics. Neither did the fact that the Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud 3 V8, which could do 115 miles per hour, also had drum brakes. With the upgrade from HD to the hastily revised HR came the 186 to replace the 179. The X2 option went through to April 1967, when the 186S with one 2-barrel carburettor and an automatic choke replaced it. The X2 was not a model in its own right, but an option on all models. My pick for an HD would be a premium manual. Unfortunately, it was never possible to specify any Holden with the X2 engine and a 4-speed manual gearbox with floor change, but you could buy an HR 186S in this guise. Mark, did the X2 manage to carve out a competition career?
Yeah, it sure did, but it was much more successful as a rally car than it ever was on the bitumen. Holden boasts a rich heritage of special build, high-performance road cars that became winning race cars, stretching right back to the EHS4. Which makes the X2 version of the HD and HR models of the mid-1960s an awkward fit in such a stellar lineup. As a competition car, the stock HD with its 179 cubic inch 6 faced an uphill battle, as we've previously discussed. The X2 option was claimed to provide a moderate 25 horsepower boost thanks to twin carburettors, a hotter camshaft, freer flowing exhaust and other tweaks to improve performance and durability. This was tied to a 3-speed column shift manual and short diff ratio. Although HD X2s were seen on race circuits in the mid-1960s, including the annual Bathurst 500, they could not emulate the success of the EHS4. The marginally improved handling of the HR facelift that followed the HD failed to fire up racetrack interest in the X2 option, even though it was based on the larger 186 cubic inch or 3-litre 6. John, former Holden rally ace Bob Watson is adamant that the X2 offered only a marginal increase in power output and that the twin carbs were just to psych out the opposition. Yeah, what was your take on that?
Well, the road test I read was of I think it was a Premier wagon, a 179 manual, and wheels, I believe, got 99.7 or something like that as their two-way average top speed. I owned an HD 179 Premier with the power sapping Power Glide two-speed order, and I reckon it did a genuine 82.
Yeah.
I reckon the same car with the manual gearbox would have done 92, and the X2 manual 100.
So you reckon there was a real substantial power increase with the twin carby set?
I think those changes to that underdeveloped engine would have made quite a big difference.
Yeah, there you go. The HD X2 competed in 3 Bathurst 500s in the 1960s. Although never a contender for outright honours, it was on track to win its class in 1966 until the engine exploded on Conrod Straight with only a few laps remaining. Although Bob Watson bluntly described the HD as the worst Holden he'd ever driven, the X2 version did enjoy considerable success as a rally car in 1965. The better handling and larger capacity HR X2 grabbed the lion's share of rally wins in 1966, claiming numerous state rally championships and lots of accolades for Holden. The X2's reign soon came to an end with the release of the HR Holden 186S in 1967, which Holden rally teams switched to en masse. The X2, though, had proven itself to be a worthy champion in the toughest of all motorsports. You can read many other great road and race stories on the Shannons Club website.
Welcome fellas to the Trafalgar Holden Museum. Neil Joyner's my name, and today I'm going to show you my precious HD Premier. I purchased it from a group in Adelaide. The chap over there had a dealership. When the poor old fella died, all of the kids couldn't get rid of the cars quick enough, and this was one of them. I was actually trying to get his 48 FX, but that went sort of overnight, and I finished up with this one. And it was a little bit hard to justify at home when I walked in and said I'd spent 30,000 on a HD Holden, and I already had one. It becomes a bit difficult. With this model, Holden came out with a 2-speed for the first time. Prior to that, they were the 3-speed Trimatics, which were a very good automatic gearbox. Same time that Holden changed to 2-speed, Ford changed from 2-speed to 3-speed. So I think some of these designers might like just to change things just to keep themselves in the job. I'm not sure, but it's we think it's almost as good as it came out of the showroom, and yeah, we're trying to keep it that way. The smell in the interior, it's only got 13,000 miles on it, and it smells like brand spanking new, so it's lovely, yeah. The press deemed there's kidney cutters on the front, and everybody, oh gee, if they hit you, they're going to cut your kidneys in half. Well, if these things cut your kidneys in half, that's the least of your problems, in my opinion. You're going to be well and truly dining upstairs if they do that to you. I'm a Shannons customer. All of my motor cars are insured with Shannons, and I would not hesitate in recommending them to anybody. They really are great. This is probably my favourite car in my collection, purely because of the condition that it's in, and also the HD model was probably the most unpopular motor car Holden ever produced. So the fact that I've got the best one of the ugliest is even better.
Shannons National Auctions Manager Chris Borobin joins us. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, John.
Welcome to the show, mate. The Holden HD and HR X2, I mean, back in its day, the X2 badge was one of the most prized badges, getting ripped off just about every car.
I think that, along with the big Volkswagen badges, were the,
Exactly.
the two most commonly taken off cars. Yes.
So is the X2 still as popular now as it was back then?
Look, I think it is, and I think today, because we don't really see many of them around.
Rare, aren't they?
Rare, yeah. And when they do come up on the market, they get snapped up very quickly. So I think from that point, it is a rare car today to find.
And what advice would you give a buyer wanting to make sure that he or she was getting the genuine X2?
The genuine article. Yeah.
That's an interesting question, that one. I mean, there were some slight differences with the X2s to the standard cars, but I think it's best to talk to your local club.
That's the repository of wisdom, isn't it?
It
Really,
is,
the
that's
club.
right.
Yeah.
There's a big club movement Australia-wide for these cars, so why not have a chat to your club and get some advice?
Some say that X2 stands for X for extractors and 2 for twin carburetors. I don't know whether it's true or not, but it's an interesting story, and it's a lovely badge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, definitely. And look, the cars had a bit more power and have that sought after accolade behind them. So
The HR model traditionally was always more popular than the HD, but I think the HD now is starting to gain a little more acceptance.
Yeah, look, I think the HD has sort of lived in the shadows of the HR
for a long time,
but
hasn't
I
it?
think it's really sort of coming into its own a bit now. So it's good to see. Yeah.
So would it be worth, if you found a genuine X2, or what you think is a genuine X2, worthwhile doing the full restoration on it in terms of what it would be valued at later?
Yeah, look, I think that's probably what I'd be recommending is if you do find a car, make sure it's a solid car to start off with and a car that's worth restoring. And if it is, yeah, absolutely.
And the X2 was available in both sedan and wagon, so there's some rare models there.
And the wagons even rarer to come by today. Yeah.
A Premier Wagon X2 manual.
That'd be a
my
car.
choice.
Fine, wouldn't it?
That'd be a car.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thank you.
And remember, you can get all the latest auction news on the Shannons Club website. If you'd like your own competition image of the HD HR X2, visit autopix.com.au.
John, looking back at the HD and the HR, particularly the HD, controversial car at the time, obviously due to the styling. What do you think Holden learnt from this car?
Well, it was controversial for a bit more than the styling. It was even dubbed by the critics highly dangerous. They're very quick with the wit, aren't they? I think Holden learnt not to do anything too extreme. I think it's almost unfortunate that it happened that way. And I think it's curious, isn't it, that what was disliked at the time, controversial is a kind word, what was disliked at the time has become much sought after now by collectors.
And a similar thing happened with the HQ Holden many years later.
The HQ was too beautiful for its own good. The Holden stylists quickly learnt that Australian buyers liked squared off cars.
And that was seen, I guess, in the HK, which followed the HD HR series. Big, squared-off, broad-shouldered Australian car. That's what they liked.
Much more mainstream.
Yeah.
Very much like Holden's version of the XR Falcon.
Yeah, and certainly in competition terms, they learned a lot of lessons from running the HD and the HR, which didn't have a big pickup on the racetrack. And then, of course, they developed the Monaro, which was a winner from the start.
Absolutely right. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this look back at the HD HR X2, and we'll catch you next time on Shannons Club TV. Bye for now.